The storm had drenched the quiet English town, rain drumming relentlessly against the windows. Grace Miller hadn't expected company that night, much less the sight of a tall, striking man clutching the hand of a terrified little girl as their broken-down car steamed at the edge of her driveway. What began as a moment of kindness, a garage open to strangers on a stormy night, would soon unravel into the kind of story she never thought her ordinary life could hold. For Julian Hart wasn't just a stranded father. He was someone with the power to change her future, her heart, and everything she thought she knew about trust, love, and second chances. Grace Miller had built her life around quiet routines. She managed the local marketing office in Surrey, her days filled with reports, client calls, and late nights with endless coffee. At 31, she wasn't unhappy, but she often wondered if this was all her life would be. Steady but unremarkable. The stormy evening felt like just another chance to curl up with tea and a book. Then came the knock at her door. It was hesitant, almost drowned by the rain, but insistent enough to pull her from her sofa. She opened it to find a man, tall and broad-shouldered, his dark hair plastered to his forehead, clothes clinging from the downpour. Beside him stood a girl, no more than 7, with wide, frightened eyes and trembling hands wrapped around his. "Our car broke down," he explained, voice rough with exhaustion. "We've been stuck for hours. I didn't know where else to go." His accent carried a crisp English lilt, softened by something deeper. Grace glanced at the child, whose lips trembled. "You both must be freezing. Come in," she said quickly, stepping aside. And that single decision would change everything she thought she knew about her life. Julian Hart guided his daughter inside, his hand never letting go of hers. Grace fetched towels, wrapped the child, Ella, in warmth, and led them to her small living room. The storm howled outside, cutting them off from the world. "You can put your car in my garage," Grace offered, handing him the keys. "At least it'll stay dry until morning." She smiled at Ella. "And you, young lady, can have some hot cocoa." Julian's guarded eyes softened at Grace's kindness. He studied her, the way her presence immediately put his daughter at ease. There was something about her, a calm strength, a kindness without hesitation, that stirred something unfamiliar in him. As Ella drifted towards sleep on Grace's sofa, Julian remained awake, watching the rain pound against the glass. He wasn't ready to reveal who he truly was, or the world of wealth, power, and expectations waiting for him. To Grace, tonight, he was just a stranded dad. And for the first time in years, he liked the sound of that. Morning came with clear skies. Grace made breakfast, the smell of coffee filling the air. Ella giggled softly as she ate pancakes, her eyes brighter now. Grace found herself enchanted by the little girl and secretly curious about Julian's composed yet intense demeanor. "I can call a mechanic for you," Grace offered, setting her cup down. Julian nodded, though his eyes lingered on her a moment too long. He wasn't used to strangers extending such care. In his world, people sought him out for favors or opportunities, not out of pure generosity. He cleared his throat. "Thank you. You didn't have to do all this." Grace shrugged. "Maybe not. But sometimes the right thing isn't about what we have to do." That line echoed in Julian's mind. He looked at Grace Miller, a woman he had met by chance, and wondered how fate could lead him to her doorstep. He wasn't ready to tell her yet, but he wasn't just a man passing through. He was the incoming CEO of the very company where Grace worked. At the office 2 days later, Grace arrived early as usual. She'd barely finished setting her files when a murmur spread through the building. Their long-awaited new CEO had finally arrived. Grace straightened her blouse, curious. When the doors to the boardroom opened, her heart stopped. Walking in with authority, tailored suit and all, was the man from her living room, the man she thought was just a stranded father, Julian Hart. Her pulse raced. He didn't glance at her at first, but when their eyes met, recognition flickered. He gave the slightest nod as if acknowledging a secret only they shared. Grace's world tilted. What did it mean that her boss, the man with power to define her career, had once sat in her living room, vulnerable and human? Julian tried to keep the boardroom professional, but his thoughts kept drifting to Grace. She had seen him in a way no one else had, not as a CEO, not as a billionaire's son, but simply as a father with a scared little girl. Grace, on the other hand, felt torn. She admired him for his resilience that night, but here he was, commanding a room with sharp precision, exuding authority that left little space for warmth. Could both men truly exist in one person? After the meeting, he stopped her in the corridor. "Ms. Miller," his voice softened just slightly. "Thank you. For the other night. For Ella." Grace blinked. "You're welcome. She's a sweet girl." The exchange was brief, but her heart raced long after he walked away. She couldn't decide if this revelation made things easier or infinitely more complicated. The weeks passed with tension. Grace excelled in her work, earning Julian's professional respect. But the unspoken bond between them lingered. Every glance, every brush of conversation carried an undercurrent of something more. Yet Grace kept her distance. She had no illusions about workplace romances, especially not with someone like him. She wasn't the type of woman who caught the eye of powerful men. She wasn't glamorous or ambitious for power. She was simply Grace. Julian, however, struggled more each day. He admired her intelligence, the quiet fire in her voice during meetings, the kindness that extended beyond the office walls. Ella spoke of her too, asking if they could visit the nice lady with Coco. One evening, as Julian walked past her desk, he stopped. "Grace," he said quietly, no title this time, "do you ever wonder why fate puts certain people in our path?" Her breath caught. She didn't answer, but her silence spoke volumes. A company event brought them closer. Grace, in a simple navy dress, looked elegant without trying. Julian watched her from across the room, surrounded by colleagues eager to impress him. Yet it was Grace who drew his attention effortlessly. When he finally approached her, she laughed softly. "Careful. People will start talking if you stand here too long." "Let them," Julian replied with a rare smile. "I'm not interested in anyone's company but yours." Grace froze, searching his eyes for truth. His words were reckless in their honesty, yet gentle. For the first time, she saw the man stripped of power, a father, a widower, a human being longing for connection. Still, fear lingered. She couldn't risk her heart or her career on a man like Julian Hart. Despite her caution, Grace found herself entangled in Ella's life. Julian often asked her to watch over his daughter when meetings ran late. Grace didn't mind. In fact, she cherished the little girl's laughter in her home. One evening, as she tucked Ella into bed, the child whispered, "I wish you were my mommy." The words pierced Grace's heart. She smiled gently, brushing Ella's hair back. "You already have the best daddy, sweetheart." Julian, overhearing from the doorway, felt something shift inside him. The image of Grace as part of his family was no longer just a fleeting thought. It was a longing. But the weight of his past, the loss of Ella's mother, the scars of betrayal in his personal life, still held him back. Could he risk loving again? Rumors began to swirl in the office. People noticed how often Julian's eyes drifted toward Grace. Though he remained professional, whispers spread fast in corporate halls. Grace hated the scrutiny. "You need to be careful," warned her friend Sophie. "People will assume things, and if it goes wrong, it's your career on the line, not his." Grace nodded, but her heart betrayed her. She couldn't deny the way Julian made her feel, seen, valued, desired. That night, Julian drove her home after a late meeting. As the car idled in front of her house, silence filled the air. Finally, he said, "Grace, I don't care what they say. You matter more." Before she could reply, Ella's sleepy voice from the back seat interrupted. Daddy, can we stay here tonight? I like it here. Grace smiled softly, her heart both breaking and swelling at once. Julian's confession opened the floodgates. They began to spend more time together. Dinners, late-night conversations, moments that blurred the line between friendship and something deeper. Grace felt alive in ways she hadn't in years. Yet she feared the imbalance. He was powerful, wealthy, influential. She was ordinary. Would she ever be enough? Julian, sensing her doubts, tried to reassure her. Grace, with you, I feel free, like I can be myself. Do you understand how rare that is for me? Tears burned her eyes, though she blinked them away. For all his power, Julian's greatest vulnerability was clear. He longed not to be admired, but to be loved. Grace realized she had already given him that. But love was never simple. A former associate of Julian's, bitter over being ousted, leaked personal details to the press. Photos of Julian at Grace's home, rumors of favoritism in the company. The scandal hit hard. Grace faced cold stares from colleagues, whispers behind her back, even veiled threats to her position. "I'm so sorry," Julian said, his hands clenched in frustration. "This was never supposed to happen." Grace shook her head. "It's not your fault, but maybe we need to step back. For Ella's sake, for the company." The words broke her own heart. She walked away before the tears could fall, leaving Julian torn between protecting his empire and protecting the woman he loved. Days turned into weeks. Grace buried herself in work, avoiding Julian as much as possible. The office felt colder without their secret glances, their small moments of warmth. Julian, too, was miserable. Ella noticed. "Daddy, why don't we see Grace anymore? Did she stop liking us?" The question cut deep. He hugged his daughter tightly. "No, sweetheart, she still cares. I just messed things up." That night, Julian stared at his reflection in the mirror. He had wealth, power, and influence. But none of it mattered without Grace. For the first time, he wondered if stepping down might be the only way to have the life he truly wanted. Fate intervened at a charity gala in London. Grace attended reluctantly, not expecting to see Julian there. But when their eyes met across the ballroom, the ache in her chest told her everything she'd been trying to deny. Julian approached, his expression raw, unguarded. "Grace, please, can we talk?" She hesitated, then nodded. They slipped away from the crowd, finding themselves in a quiet corner. "I miss you," he confessed simply. "Not as my employee, not as some scandal in the papers, just as you." Her resolve crumbled. Tears slipped free as she whispered, "I miss you too." Their reunion wasn't without struggle. They agreed to take things slowly, to shield their relationship from the ruthless eyes of the corporate world. But love has a way of seeping through barriers. Ella's joy was undeniable. She hugged Grace fiercely one evening and said, "Now everything feels right again." Grace laughed through tears, holding the child close. In that moment, she knew, no matter the challenges ahead, this little girl already felt like family. Julian watched from the doorway, his heart swelling with a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. For once, he let himself imagine a future where love and family mattered more than boardroom victories. But life tested them again. A major merger placed immense pressure on Julian. Rivals questioned his leadership, using his personal life as ammunition. Grace stood by him, offering quiet strength. "You've built this company on your vision. Don't let them make you doubt yourself." Julian looked at her, admiration in his eyes. "You believe in me more than I do sometimes." She smiled softly. "That's what love does. It reminds us who we are when we forget." Her faith became his anchor, even as the storm raged on. One evening, after another grueling day, Julian brought Grace and Ella to his countryside estate. It was sprawling, beautiful, but empty in ways that spoke volumes. "I bought this place thinking it would be home," he admitted, his voice low. "But it never was. Not until now, with you here." Grace wandered through the halls, her hand brushing the cold stone walls. She saw the loneliness etched in every corner. Then she looked at Ella, laughing as she ran through the garden, and Julian's eyes softened as they watched her. In that moment, Grace knew. Together, they could fill this emptiness with love. Still, Grace struggled with insecurity. At a company dinner, she overheard two executives sneer that she was nothing but a charity case Julian had elevated. The words cut deep. That night, she confessed to Julian, "Maybe they're right. Maybe I don't belong in your world." Julian cupped her face, his voice fierce. "Don't you ever believe that. You belong with me, not because of where I stand, but because of who you are. You're the only one who's ever seen me. Not the CEO, not the billionaire, just Julian." Tears filled her eyes. For the first time, she truly believed him. Their love grew stronger, but the biggest test came unexpectedly. Ella fell ill, a sudden fever that sent them rushing to the hospital. Hours stretched into a blur of worry. Grace stayed by Julian's side, holding his hand, comforting him even when he tried to hide his fear. "She'll be okay," Grace whispered, even as her own heart trembled. When Ella finally opened her eyes, weak but smiling, Julian broke down. He clung to Grace, whispering, "I don't know what I'd do without you." In that fragile moment, their bond became unshakable. Ella's recovery brought clarity. Julian no longer cared about gossip or rivals. He realized the only legacy that mattered was the family he was building with Grace. One quiet evening, he led her into the garden of his estate. Lanterns lit the path, soft music drifted through the air. He took her hands, his eyes vulnerable. "Grace Miller," he began, voice thick with emotion, "you walked into my life on a stormy night and changed everything. Will you marry me?" Grace's breath caught, tears spilling freely. "Yes," she whispered. "1,000 times, yes." Ella squealed with delight, wrapping her little arms around them both. News of their engagement shook the company, but this time, Julian didn't flinch. He announced it proudly, defying anyone who dared question his choices. Grace, too, held her head high. For once, she didn't feel like the ordinary girl who didn't belong. She was the woman Julian loved, the stepmother Ella adored, and the future she once thought impossible was now real. Together, they weathered the storm of opinions, stronger for every challenge they had faced. Love had given them courage. The wedding took place in the English countryside, a blend of elegance and intimacy. Colleagues, friends, and family gathered, but the most important presence was Ella, who walked down the aisle with Grace, holding her hand proudly. As Julian and Grace exchanged vows, there was no doubt. This was more than a union of two people. It was the creation of a family built on love, trust, and resilience. When they kissed, the crowd cheered, but all Grace heard was Ella's joyous laughter. For once, her heart was full. In the months that followed, life wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. Julian balanced his role as CEO with his role as husband and father. Grace continued her career, carving her path with newfound confidence. Every night, they gathered around the dinner table, laughter echoing through what was once an empty house. Ella thrived, her eyes brighter than ever, her heart secure in the love of both her father and her new mother. Grace often thought back to that stormy night when a knock on her door changed everything. She had opened her home to a stranger and found her family. And as Julian wrapped his arms around her one evening, whispering, "You saved us," Grace smiled, knowing the truth. They had saved each other.